Greetings and welcome to the Transforming Loneliness interview series. I'm so excited to be bringing this inspiring and hopeful body of work into the world. I'd like to begin with a dedication. This work is dedicated to all beings everywhere who suffer the pain of separation, isolation, disconnection, and loneliness. May these interviews offer you inspiration, guidance, nourishment, and hope. This work is also dedicated to the trees who haven't forgotten how to live in right relationship with all beings, and to the children, inner and outer children who haven't given up hope and will wait forever for us to find them and to love them. I'm Laura Parker. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in private practice in Oakland, California for more than 20 years. My work is ecopsychological, somatic, imaginal, experiential, and inspired and nourished by the Dharma. By this I mean that I work from the perspective that human health and thriving is inseparable from the health and thriving of our home, the earth, and therefore a source of vast intelligence, vitality. I see our bodies as our most intimate personal connection to the earth, and therefore a source of vast intelligence, vitality, and creativity in response to some of our most pressing dilemmas. By imaginal, I mean that the creative intelligence of life doesn't communicate to us verbally. It uses the language of image, body sensations, and emotions. And change happens through having a new experience, not through new ideas, concepts, or recycling what we already know. My study and practice of the Dharma has given me confidence and courage derived from my connection to the basic goodness that resides in all of us. First, I want to say that although this interview is the first in the series, in other words, it's the first one that you're seeing, it's actually the last interview that's being recorded. So I am speaking to you from the perspective of having received all the nourishment and wisdom and guidance of 15 amazing speakers. And now I am so honored and delighted to be able to pass this on to you. Today, I'll be interviewed by Stephanie Briggs. Stephanie Briggs is a counseling astrologer, life coach, online business consultant, writer, singer, and speaker. Through her business, Heart Blossom, she activates, guides, and supports empaths, intuitives, and highly sensitive women to come into greater expression and embodiment of their authentic power. Stephanie started Heart Blossom out of her desire to support people in connecting with and bringing forth the wisdom of their hearts. Her mission is to be an agent of transformation and evolution toward a new heart-centered paradigm on Earth. Thank you so much for joining me today, Stephanie.
Oh, it is my pleasure. I am so excited to be here and to hear all the wisdom that you have to share with us today. So to get us started, the media is always telling us that there's an epidemic of loneliness in the modern world. And why do you think that is, Laura?
Well, I think that there's no mistake that there's an epidemic of loneliness happening at exactly the same time that there is an epidemic of disconnection on our planet. An epidemic of disconnection on multiple levels, but I think the most crucial disconnection is disconnection from our Earth, our home, our planet. And that disconnection then is reflected on multiple other dimensions that we'll explore more in this interview.
So it sounds like there's a lot of rich insight that's available here. And so I'm curious, how did you arrive at your unique approach to transforming loneliness?
Well, I arrived at this work through many years of wrestling with this presence of loneliness in my own life. And because of the kind of person that I am, I found myself exploring this topic from multiple perspectives, leaving no stone unturned. I really did try everything. And I have to say that my general approach for many, many years was to try and get rid of loneliness because of how painful it is. But nonetheless, my approach was to try to address it from many different angles. I looked at it from the point of view of my life history, my trauma, my family patterns, personal behavior, tendencies to want to retreat or hide out. I tried looking at it from attachment wounding and ways of trying to survive my own history of trauma. I looked at it from the point of view of my own unconscious, like what unconscious parts of me are in the driver's seat of my life that I'm not aware of. And so I really explored that angle in great depth. And I found that ultimately, although all of that work was incredibly useful and rich and healing, it didn't get rid of loneliness. And so I reached a point where I realized, I've tried everything here and loneliness is still here. And so I had a moment of despair last year when I had moved to a new place and I was particularly going through a bout of loneliness, and I was talking to a friend about it. And she said something very wise. She said, Laura, your loneliness is not the problem. Your resistance and resentment of your loneliness is the problem. And even though I didn't really like hearing that, like I really wanted loneliness to be the problem, I could see that she was right, that the way I was approaching loneliness was from a point of view of an enemy or an adversary that I was trying to get rid of. And I could see that that resentment was getting in the way, actually. And also because of where I had reached that point of despair and desperation, I was really willing and open to a new perspective. So when she said that to me, the words just went right in. I saw the truth of what she was saying, and I was willing to kind of shift my orientation immediately. And right at that moment, I simply stopped trying to get rid of loneliness. So I made a 180. Instead of, turning away from loneliness, I turned towards it. And I asked the question, who are you? And what do you want me to know? And I want to underline those questions because I would like my speakers to remember those questions. They're so useful. Even though it's hard to turn towards loneliness because it's painful, if we can have the courage and strength to turn towards it and to ask, who are you and what would you like me to know? So I asked that question, and immediately this image of my 2-year-old self came up. And now I didn't actually have memories of age 2 because that's a pre-verbal time, or a time when, I do have some language, but anyway, I didn't have a verbal memory of this thing that was shown to me. And what was shown to me was an image of my 2-year-old self in a particular posture of collapse, despondency, and inertness. So there was so much information that came just through the posture. Like I didn't receive a lot of verbal information. It was just an image. And yet I received an immediate story. Like I knew exactly what was going on for that 2-year-old self. And I saw that loneliness isn't exactly what I think it is. And this was very illuminating and liberating to see that. In other words, I saw that loneliness that I feel in the present moment can actually be a memory. So many of us, when we're lonely, we're kind of just reacting to it as if it's about right now. It's about the current circumstances in our lives. And what I want to say is that loneliness can be a memory. And I was blown away by the power of asking the question, who are you and what do you want me to know? And also about the information that I received. And I saw that this could potentially be helpful to other people. Because what I received from the 2-year-old actually gave me so much information about how my life had unfolded after that. Like certain decisions I made in response to that trauma or that attachment wounding of that at 2, and ways that I had oriented myself towards life in order to try and survive that experience was all embedded in that image. And so many things made sense about how my life had gone after that. Questions that I had had for years, like why is this going on? You know, I received many useful answers. And so I saw that, oh, this could help others. And I also saw that given my years of struggling with loneliness personally, as well as my years as a therapist and an educator, that I was in a unique position to offer something to the world with this work and to develop it. And I felt like I was being invited to make this work available to the world. And I just decided to say yes to it, even though it also felt scary and daunting to take this on. I just saw this is a way to make something useful out of this experience. And my experience since then has been that it's been enormously enlivening. And I can't tell you how much I've grown and changed since I decided to say yes to developing and offering this work to the world.
Wow, that was powerful. I am so touched by your story of connecting with this 2-year-old self and all the wisdom that she had to share. And it sounds like you've really intimately journeyed with loneliness in your own life, and now you're taking that courageous step to share what you've learned with others. And so, in addition to what you've learned in your personal exploration, like what have you learned about loneliness in your research?
Well, my primary orientation is that all experience, including loneliness, is part of the sacred unfolding of life, our individual human life and the larger life. So in my research, I aspire to meet loneliness in a dignified way on its own terms with respect and curiosity. So my approach is to listen to loneliness. And I've learned that if we think we already know what it is and why it's here, then we are full of our own preconceptions and we miss the chance to receive its message. And I think I'll say a lot more about that in the interview, the ways that we think we already know what loneliness is, you know? And instead of assuming I've learned to ask loneliness, so all of my research has come from the place of asking. And I've learned that loneliness is complex and multidimensional. It's not what we think it is. It's about a lot more than being bereft of human companionship and connection. And I learned that it's about the experience that something vital and necessary for life is missing. And I've learned that loneliness is a messenger. It carries news of disconnection, and it inspires and guides us towards reconnection.
So it sounds like curiosity is really important in this process as you see it. And I'm curious if you could say more about what loneliness is. Like, how do you define loneliness?
Well, it's important to distinguish between solitude, loneliness, and longing. So all three of these bear a lot in common, and they are often confused with each other. And even when I'm speaking, I might conflate the three of them. So I have a kind of a fluid, intuitive way of working with loneliness. And so but I do want to mention these three aspects. So there's solitude, loneliness, and longing. And solitude is actually chosen aloneness. It's aloneness that can be treasured and desired and sought after for the ways that it gives us a way to connect with our deeper truths and to hear the still, quiet voice inside. So solitude, Wendell Berry writes, in solitude, one's inner voices become audible and one responds more clearly to other lives. So solitude is absolutely necessary for being a human being who can participate fully in life. Loneliness is defined, I want to share a quote from Maria Popova, and she responds to Wendell Berry's quote by saying, in loneliness, one's inner scream becomes deafening, deadening, severing any thread of connection to other lives. So she's saying in some way that loneliness undoes all the benefits that we can get from solitude. And she seems to be implying that there's a bereftness, a wretchedness, a feeling that something utterly necessary is missing, a despondence and hopelessness, a pulling inward, a hiding, perhaps some shame, self-blame, insufficiency, and failure that could all be implied in what we might call loneliness. So loneliness researcher John Cacioppo defined loneliness in this way. He said that loneliness isn't about being alone, which I find rather surprising that he says that. It's about not feeling connected. So what he's pointing out here is that we can be in a room full of people and still feel lonely. Even though when we intuitively think about loneliness, we usually associate it with being alone. He's talking about a deeper level of what's really going on, which is the feeling of not being connected. So this is something that I really took up in my work. And I saw that loneliness this is my definition of loneliness, after I've given you all these other ones, that loneliness is a sacred messenger. And it points out to us that disconnection is happening. And it does that through pain. So the evolutionary purpose of pain, it's like an alarm bell that's saying, hey, pay attention here. So loneliness points out disconnection, and then it also contains with it the motivation to reconnect, energy, and impetus towards reconnection. And so I say, this gets to the definition of longing, that longing is our motivation and desire for connection. And I say that longing is hidden inside loneliness. And that if we just kind of try and get rid of loneliness and we treat it as an enemy, then we miss the chance to really connect with the hidden gift inside loneliness, which is one, that it shows us where disconnection is, but the other piece is that it gives us that longing and desire and motivation and impetus towards reconnection. And that is very life-affirming and creative. And we miss that if we just try and get rid of loneliness.
Wow, there's so many different perspectives here that I have never considered before. I feel like you're blowing my mind a little.
Yay, that's the intention.
Yeah. So usually we think of loneliness as this longing for more human connection and companionship. And you seem to be saying that it's actually much more than that. So what is the importance of human-to-human connection?
Well, one thing I like to say about that is that I use the image of a mandala in my work. So, and this also is just something that came to me through listening to loneliness. And I see in the mandala, loneliness is the center, and then there's all these spokes that radiate out from the center. And the spokes are the multiple dimensions of connection and disconnection. The pathways to healing or transforming loneliness. There's multiple pathways, but they all work together to create 360 degrees of transformation. And so one of the spokes is human to human connection and companionship. And that doesn't diminish it at all in its importance. It's vital and crucial and necessary. So being bonded with other humans in nourishing, supportive, and enlivening relationships is crucial to human thriving. We need to be seen, we need to be nurtured and nourished, we need to be accepted and loved, we need to be welcomed, we need to be known, we need help in developing our own unique gifts so that we can then become humans that offer those gifts to life. And we can't do that without certain kinds of human connection that actually is quite missing in our modern world. And the legacy of trauma, as well as the speed, busyness, and distraction of modern life, has eroded human to human connection tremendously. And I also believe that connection with other humans doesn't happen in a vacuum, because humans are not separate from our environment. We can't expect our connections with each other to thrive, while at the same time, the other species and ecosystems and cycles of life on which our very existence depends are being destroyed. So I just want to name a couple of the dimensions of connection between humans and other humans. And one is body and touch. You know, we absolutely need touch. And that's something often that lonely people are really missing. And when we're infants, we absolutely depend on our caregivers for survival. And then later, our human development needs other humans for some of the ways that I've already mentioned. And then I want to share a quote from a psychoanalyst named Adam Phillips, who had something really beautiful to say. He says that solitude is a potentially fatal journey for an infant in the absence of sufficient maternal care. And so he's really pointing to all the ways that we can have trouble in life if we haven't received bonding and attachment and responsive and attuned care. But he also says it is worth remembering that the infant in the dark, the infant by himself, is not only waiting for the mother. And so I find this very inspiring to consider. What is that 2-year-old child or that infant inside of us, the one who is calling out? And maybe let's not even limit it to the infant. What is that part inside of us calling out for that is not only the mother or is not only the other human? So that leads us to the other dimensions.
So if what you're saying is that loneliness is really the effect of disconnection, like what are we disconnected from in your view?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the mandala of, with the multiple dimensions of connection and disconnection, and that human to human bonding is one of those dimensions. So the other dimensions are, well, one thing I want to say is that the human connection that is missing often is a result of an environment or a culture that does not make it possible for that other human to be available. So we have to look at what are the other humans dealing with that get in the way of them being available to us for the kind of connection that we feel like we need. Um, and then I'm going to tell you about what some of those things are. The first one that I want to say, and this is ubiquitous, is trauma. Trauma disrupts our ability to be present because trauma is an experience of overwhelm, an experience of such intensity that our usual ways of coping is overwhelmed. And one of the ways that we tend to cope is by tuning out or turning away, forgetting, and not being present, otherwise known as dissociation. And our culture is built upon trauma. For example, the genocide and colonization of Native peoples and the atrocity of slavery that are too unbearable to face. I think our culture in America, the United States of America, has a history of tuning out, turning away, not facing, not owning that history. And loneliness is an outcome of trauma and how we try to cope with and survive trauma. The unbearableness of trauma makes us want to forget, to turn away, to ignore. But what we have forgotten doesn't cease to exist. It continues to operate there in the invisible realm in the background, and it is still there. And it's influencing us humans all the time. And forgetting is profoundly lonely because it creates the experience of separation and isolation from our own experience and life itself. Being forgotten is also lonely. So by forgetting our traumatic past, we condemn those parts of ourselves to solitary confinement. We deprive them of the loving attention, contact, and care that could liberate them and consequently ourselves. So that's what I want to say about trauma. And then there's just modern culture itself. This is another facet of the mandala. And that includes things like individualism, capitalism, technology, speed, distraction. All of those things get in the way of human-to-human connection. Then there's something called human centricity. And this is the tendency to see ourselves as the center of the universe and to see the rest of life as existing to serve our own purposes. This view is inherently lonely because it separates and isolates humans from the rest of life. Another facet of the mandala is disembodiment, the way we're disconnected from our bodies and we tend to live in our heads. And I realize I'm rushing through these because each one could have a whole interview about it, but I just want to name the facets. So another one is very interesting. This one came to me actually through me asking loneliness what it wants me to know. And one day loneliness said to me, Laura, loneliness is how it feels to be encapsulated inside your white skin. And what I saw from this is that racism, white supremacy, socialization, cultural conditioning, these are all different ways, colonization, these are all different ways of thinking about the ways that as a white person, I've been programmed by my culture to think in ways that are divisive and exclusionary, isolating, separating, and ultimately lonely. And so this was quite a revelation when loneliness said this to me. And I have been, since I heard that, I've been doing a lot of exploration of the, my conditioning as a white person. So that's another whole realm that can lead to liberation and reconnection if we take it up and follow it. A few others are disconnection from ancestors. In our preoccupation with progress and modernity, we tend to want to just throw the old out, get rid of it. There's even practices of, I heard that one thing that the church did was when Christianity came into old sites of earth-loving people, they dug up their graveyards, and they would build the church right on top of the graveyard. And so this is a way actually of kind of trying to enforce a disconnection from ancestors. So many of us have this experience of not being, many, in particular white people, but I can't speak for people of other races. I think this might be a very common and universal experience in the modern world of being disconnected from our ancestral past. And we lose so much richness and nourishment and vitality that's available there. And I think we can have the feeling of being bereft and homeless and exiled because of this disconnection from ancestors. So another dimension of the mandala is disconnection from place. And because of all the transience in modern life, and lots of travel and moving, we don't have the same kind of feeling that our ancestors may have had of connection to place, and of being nourished and fed and told who we are by the places in which we live. So I think that contributes to loneliness. And then there's our disconnection from the earth, from nature. And lastly, there's our disconnection from what I might call God, but it could also be just another way of thinking about nature and the life force. That part of ourselves that is bigger than us, that has the kind of intelligence that could create this amazing planet, that could give rise, intelligence and creativity, that could give rise to all the amazing ways that life works. So the thing I love about this mandala, and those are some of the facets that I've discovered so far, and maybe there's more. But what I love about it is that when we can see all the disconnection, we can also see ways to reconnect. So the mandala gives us both.
Wow. I really appreciate all the context that you're bringing to this in terms of our individual experiences and also our collective experience and environment. And wow, there's so much here to work with. And it sounds like it's continuing to unfold, this understanding that you have of loneliness and all these many facets. And so your work and this very event, you've called it Transforming Loneliness. And I wonder why, how you came up with that as a concept, as a name.
Well, a couple things. I'll just name two aspects. I could go on about it, but I really think it's not about healing, and it's not about getting rid of. It really is about loneliness changing from one thing into something else. And that's what the word transformation means. So and what we're doing is we're transforming our relationship with it from an attitude of trying to get rid of it to inviting it as a sacred messenger. And also I love the way that transformation implies a death of a certain sort. So we really do have to be willing or look at our willingness to have our previous way of experiencing and knowing loneliness die. And believe it or not, many of us are surprisingly attached to the way things are. So when we're invited into change, even though we might bemoan, and just say, hey, I hate how lonely my life is, when we're being shown or given ways to find reconnection, many of us might hesitate. And I'm very curious about that in myself and others. Like, why would I hesitate if I'm saying I want more connection in my life? So I think it has to do with this thing about death, that we really do have to look at, well, I'm going to be letting go of a certain way of being. I'm going to be letting go of a way of living, a way of being, a way of thinking, a way of perceiving, and a way of acting. That all of those are ways that have a certain history and a certain momentum. you know? And so the transformation involves the death or the letting go, the releasing of what has been.
Hmm. Yeah, I know I've had to continually confront my own preference for comfort and what's familiar, even when sometimes it's very clear that it's not working. And you've mentioned that these conventional approaches that we have to working with loneliness, they don't actually work. So for someone out there who's listening and who's curious, like, how can someone begin to meet loneliness in a new way?
Well, that's great. Thank you. And even though I don't believe that transforming loneliness is a linear step-by-step process, I actually would like to share 3 steps with you. And the 3 steps are, and it won't be surprising because it's embedded in everything else I've already said. The 3 steps are welcoming loneliness as a sacred messenger, listening to the message, and taking action that honors the message. So I'd like to explore these steps through sharing a poem. And this is one of my favorite poems. It's called Love Dogs, and it was written by Rumi, translated by Coleman Barks. And I feel very nervous about sharing a Rumi poem because I know, like so many scholarly books have been written about these poems, and my response to it is very intuitive and personal. And so I'm just going to share from there. And before I start, I'd like to mention that this poem does contain a word that might not be familiar to people. And the word is Khidr, Khidr. And I looked up the definition of it, and it means a righteous servant of God possessing great wisdom or mystic knowledge. So here's the poem. One night, a man was crying, Allah, Allah. His lips grew sweet with praising, until a cynic said, so, I've heard you calling out, but have you ever gotten any response? The man had no answer to that. He quit praying and fell into a confused sleep. He dreamed he saw Khidr, the guide of souls, in a thick green foliage. Why did you stop praising? Because I've never heard anything back. This longing you express is the return message. The grief you cry out from draws you toward union. Your pure sadness that wants help is the secret cup. Listen to the moan of a dog for its master. That whining is the connection. There are love dogs no one knows the names of. Give your life to be one of them.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, so there's so much in here that, we could talk about. And I do want to just make a few points. It's so rich. So this poem relates a lot to how I work with loneliness. First of all, we begin with a man who is calling out to God, and his lips are sweet with praising. And then a cynic questions whether the man has ever gotten a response. And the man quits praising and falls into a confused sleep. How many of us have had this very same experience of exposing our heart's tender and vulnerable strivings to disrespectful, invalidating doubts and questions that ultimately shut us down, whether those perspectives come from within or without? Khidr's response seems to tell us, don't be fooled by surface appearances. There is something deeper going on here that is beyond what you can see or touch or measure. It is even beyond your usual way of thinking about things. So let us look a little deeper at the 3 steps. Rumi says, this longing you express is the return message. He is telling us that our loneliness, our longing carries a message. So this is step one, where we learn to welcome loneliness as a sacred messenger. How do we do this? Because longing is painful, when it comes knocking on our door, our first impulse is to try to get rid of it. And that's true for me as well. I've had to train in the discipline of not refusing the knock on the door. The evolutionary purpose of the pain, of loneliness and any other kind of pain, is to get our attention, and we ignore pain at our peril. So even though our first impulse is to send the messenger away, we must do the opposite. We must open the door to the messenger and invite him or her inside. So to me, inviting the messenger inside means we go inside. And one way to do this is we take a moment to close our eyes and turn our attention towards the dark, mysterious, nonverbal realm of the body, which is, I believe, our own personal doorway into the vast, living, creative intelligence of the earth, and beyond that, the cosmos. So we dive into how the loneliness and longing feels, and we ask, who are you and what would you like me to know? And then we listen for the response that comes. The poem tells us that our tender, vulnerable human heart's capacity to feel longing is itself what the longing is longing for. How could this be true? This sounds paradoxical and it doesn't make sense. I invite you to ponder the question. How could it be that the longing you express is the return message? How could it be that the absence, the experience that something vital and necessary is missing, is what you have been longing for? First of all, the absence isn't empty. It's full of messages and connection and support and nourishment that just can't be seen or measured and may not come in the form we expect. All we need to bring is our own courage to not run away from the pain, and our curiosity and openness to be shown something that we don't already know. The longing is inviting us to step outside of the cultural conditioning and habitual perceptions and practices that gave rise to our estrangement and bereftness in the first place. We are being called into a new way of seeing and responding and experiencing, where something new is possible. And again, because longing is painful, it's very difficult to turn towards it and engage it and listen to it. But that is what we must do. And with practice, we become better at it, because the longing contains the answers we seek. So in step two, after we have invited the messenger in, we listen to the message. And Rumi gives us some clues about how to do this. He says, your pure sadness that wants help is the secret cup. And I love this image of the secret cup. I've even painted paintings about the secret cup. So what is the secret cup? I believe the secret cup is the place inside each of us where we can engage with guidance that comes from the creative intelligence of life. In other words, the secret cup helps us to tap into information that comes from a place that is bigger and wiser than the causes and conditions that created our loneliness in the first place. The idea here is that we each have a secret cup inside of us. We each have the capacity to be in relationship with the mysterious, invisible forces that shape our universe. The pain of loneliness, in Rumi's words, your pure sadness that wants help, signals the brokenness, which is the openness and availability and receptivity for connection, the secret cup, that is necessary in order to find our way into greater intimacy and belonging. Loneliness is the secret cup. It's the felt sense of the absence, the space that has the capacity to receive the enormity of that which we are longing for, which Rumi and the Sufis might call God. But it is that nameless experience that something is calling us, and we feel a longing for union with whatever that is. The trick is that the secret cup needs to be empty in order to receive that which we are longing for. So, listening to the message requires the emptiness of the secret cup, which means we need to let go of our own ideas and preconceptions, everything we think we know about what loneliness is and what it needs. And if you've ever been in that state of loneliness where we're like insisting and demanding, no, my loneliness has to be solved in this way, and we get in that state is the opposite of the secret cup. The emptiness of the secret cup means getting out of our own way, letting go of our insistence that union has to take a particular form, our insistence that we already know how our loneliness should be resolved, closes the door to the myriad possibilities for connection that are always waiting for us. We all want help to create more meaningful connection with who we are, with each other, and all of life. Loneliness can give us so much guidance, but only if we don't rush to fill the space with junk. Busyness, small talk, buying stuff, and of course, those ubiquitous screens. We fill the space with all this junk, and we're still lonely because the junk is getting in the way of all the richness that is trying to enter our lives. So instead of filling the space with our expectations and demands, we can be curious. We can ask, who are you? Where do you come from? Why are you here? What do you want me to know? What do you need? What are you longing for? And these questions themselves create connection within. And then we can listen to the answers and find ways to deepen into and explore further what we are hearing. For example, if you ask the question, what are you longing for? You might hear, I'm longing for touch, or creativity, or expression, or space, or coziness, or I'm longing to be seen and known. And to go deeper with one of those, let's say that the answer you hear is that you're longing to be seen and known. This brings us to step 3, taking action that honors the message. So Rumi tells us, the grief you cry out from draws you toward union. I think this is telling us about the way that the pain of loneliness itself carries our longing and desire, which is very creative and life-affirming, an impetus, a directionality towards reconnection with the source of life. Longing can be very precise in its guidance if we cultivate the art of listening to the language that it speaks. The grief and utter bereftness of loneliness has deep wisdom about what will satisfy the longing and on the other side, what merely numbs, suppresses, or distracts. So the second step is about receiving the message, getting a clue about what we are longing for. And then the third step is taking an action that honors and takes seriously the message we have received. So this summit is an example of me taking the third step. I took an action based on all the messages I had received from loneliness. And through taking this action, and it doesn't have to be something as big and complicated as a summit, it can be tiny, tiny actions, but it tells loneliness, I heard you. And we are in a relationship. We are in a reciprocal, creative, life-affirming relationship where if you speak to me, I will listen. I will take action based on what you have heard, what you have said. And then loneliness or life in itself is more likely to send me more messages because it knows that I'm going to honor what it tells me. So there's this reciprocity, a giving and receiving between us and the messenger. So let's say, as I said before, let's say you've heard that your loneliness carries a longing to be seen and known. You could honor this message and show your gratitude by taking the next step, by exploring more deeply what this means. You might discover simple ways to express or reveal yourself more, to risk showing who you are to others. This could take many forms, small to big. You could also seek to know and see others more, and not just human others. You could venture into an exploration of the ways that the more than human others perceive and know you and each other, the ways that you are already seen and known without even realizing it. You could expand the ways that you see and know yourself and life and the ocean of aliveness all around you, which is bigger than you. So, through taking action, you let loneliness know that its message has been received. This keeps the doors of communication open. And if you take those 3 steps, you will be guided into greater connection, belonging, and love, and your experience of loneliness will never be the same.
Wow. Wow. I love that Rumi poem. I feel like with Rumi, it's always like a seashell. It looks pretty on the outside, but then there's so much inside if you take a look. And it sounds like you're really inviting us into a practice of being in greater relationship with our loneliness and with others around us and the environment. And I think there's so much power in what you're offering here. And so as we're unfortunately coming towards the end of our time together, I wonder if there's anything else that you'd like to share with us about transforming loneliness.
Well, one thing that I forgot to mention earlier is the whole topic of introversion and how we have such an extroverted culture. And so I would add introversion, extroversion, maybe to the facets of the mandala, and that we really need to embrace, if we are introverts like I am, I think we need to learn how to love our introversion, rather than trying to change ourselves into someone that we are not. Even though we are in a culture that, really, celebrates extroversion. And so it can be very hard to own and claim our introversion. I think it's very, very important. Another thing that I wanted to mention, and this is in line with the topic of introversion, is we can often be at cross purposes with ourselves. One part of us longs for company and another part of us craves privacy. And so I think we need to come into relationship with all those parts, and to not expect that we're going to, that one of them is going to get their way, even though that one might be more loud and insistent. That we can be curious about, oh, if there's something that I say I want, like connection, but I keep making choices to have privacy, then there must be a part of me that actually wants that. And how can we learn to listen to all the voices inside of us that give rise to our experience? Lastly, I just want to say that our shame about loneliness often derives from a false sense that we should be able to control what happens in our lives. But so many factors are beyond our control. We need to respect and even be amazed by the mysteriousness of our lives.
Yes, I'm an introvert too, so I can relate to what you shared there. And definitely it's a process of accepting and connecting with all the different parts. And so as we finish up, what would you like to share with our audience today about upcoming programs and events that you'll be offering, and any ways that folks can connect with you?
Well, first of all, I'd just like to say that I am a licensed therapist, as I mentioned before. So I do have a private practice in Oakland, California. So I'm available for private sessions, and you can visit my website at lauraparkermft.com. And then the Transforming Loneliness Project has its own website, and that's called transformingloneliness.com. And you can find out about more details about these programs that I'm going to mention on the Transforming Loneliness website. But there's 3 upcoming events. One is a free community meeting that will be held via Zoom on Wednesday, February 27th at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. And that is timed with the end of the summit, the actual, event of all these interviews. So I just thought that that would be a wonderful place for us to come together, and those in the audience who'd actually like to have some interaction should feel free to join me. I will send out a link and a notice about that event. And then I'm offering an 8-week in-person program called Coming into Connection. And it's going to be through my private practice in Oakland, and it starts on April 24th. And then I'm also going to be offering a day-long community loneliness ritual on May 19th, also in Oakland, California.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all these different offerings that you have. And I know there are lots of different ways to connect and deepen in this journey with loneliness. So once again, just thank you so much for sharing all of this information and insight and so much of your own personal self and journey. I know I've learned so much through hearing what you have to say today.
Thank you. It's my sincere hope that this work will expand and enlivens people's experience of loneliness and their life in general.